If you think you know what hell looks like, you haven't seen ADX Florence. Before we dive into the darkest corners of America's most secure prison, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell, because what you're about to hear will haunt you long after this video ends. Drop a comment if you dare. Now, let's descend into the concrete tomb where monsters live. The call came through at 2:47 a.m. on a freezing January morning in 1995. FBI Special Agent Sarah Chun had been tracking the ghost for 3 years, a serial killer who vanished without a trace after each murder, leaving behind only a signature, a small origami crane folded from pages of classic literature. 12 victims across 7 states. 12 cranes. 0 leads. Until tonight. Chen's phone buzzed with coordinates to an abandoned warehouse in South Chicago. The tip was anonymous, but the details were too specific to ignore. She arrived with a tactical team, their breath forming clouds in sub-zero air, boots crunching on frozen gravel. The warehouse loomed before them, a skeletal monument to industrial decay, its broken windows like dead eyes staring into the darkness. They entered with weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the pitch-black interior. The smell hit them first. Decay. Chemical cleaners trying to mask something worse. Chen's stomach tightened. She had smelled death before, but this was different. Controlled. Methodical. Terrifying. In the center of the warehouse stood a single metal chair bolted to the floor. Spotlights, professionally mounted, surrounded it like a stage. This wasn't a dump site. This was a theater. Chen's pulse quickened as her light swept across the walls. Photographs. Hundreds of them. Each victim, cataloged in meticulous detail. Before, during, after. The ghost had been documenting his work like an artist preparing for a gallery opening. But something was wrong. Chun counted the photos. There were 13 sets, 13 victims. They had only found 12 bodies. Her blood ran cold. Somewhere, a 13th victim existed. Dead or alive, she couldn't tell. The team fanned out, searching every corner, every shadow. That's when Officer Marcus Webb called out from the back room, his voice cracking with an emotion Chun had never heard from the veteran cop. Fear. The back room was small, concrete, windowless. A single bare bulb swung from the ceiling, casting moving shadows that made everything feel alive. Against the far wall stood a metal desk with a laptop, its screen glowing blue in the darkness. Chin approached slowly, her weapon steady, her mind racing. The screen displayed a document, not a confession, not a manifesto. A list, names, addresses, photographs. 47 people, 47 potential victims. Each entry contained intimate details, daily routines, family members, security systems, vulnerabilities. The ghost hadn't been finishing his work. He had barely started. This warehouse was an ending. It was a beginning. Chen's radio crackled. Agent Chun, we've got movement on the perimeter. Someone's watching us. She spun toward the door, signaling her team. They moved as one, pouring out of the warehouse into the frozen night. Flashlight beams swept the surrounding buildings, the empty lots, the rusted equipment scattered like bones in a graveyard. Nothing. Whoever had been there was gone. Then Chin saw it. On the hood of her vehicle, placed with surgical precision, a fresh origami crane. This one was different. It was folded from a page of her own case file, a document that should have been locked in FBI headquarters, a document only she and 3 other agents had access to. The ghost hadn't just been watching them. He had been inside their organization, moving through their most secure spaces like a phantom. Webb picked up the crane with gloved hands, unfolding it carefully. Inside, written in precise block letters, was a message. You found my workshop. Impressive. But you'll never find me. I'm closer than you think. Tell them I'm ready for my new home. Tell them ADX Florence is waiting. Chen's hands trembled as she read the words. The ghost wasn't running. He was surrendering. But why? What kind of killer turns himself in after preparing for 47 more murders? What kind of monster walks willingly into America's most brutal prison? The warehouse had been swept clean of fingerprints, DNA, any evidence that could identify the ghost. The laptop was a dead end, routing through a dozen proxy servers across 3 continents. They had his workshop, his victim list, his trophies. But they didn't have him. Not yet. Chin stood in the empty warehouse as dawn broke. Pale light filtering through broken windows, illuminating the photographs on the walls. 47 people were living their lives right now, unaware that death had been planning their end in meticulous detail. 47 families who would sleep tonight not knowing how close they had come to unspeakable horror. Her phone rang. The director. They had him. The ghost had walked into the Denver FBI field office 3 hours ago and confessed to everything, every murder, every detail. He gave them his real name, his address, his entire history. And then he made one request. Send me to ADX Florence. Send me to the place where I belong. But when they opened the file he handed them, the one containing his full confession and the location of the 13th victim, what they found changed everything. The file contained more than a confession. It contained a blueprint, a detailed architectural map of every maximum security prison in the United States, with handwritten notes in the margins, guard rotation schedules, surveillance blind spots, structural weaknesses. The ghosts had been studying prison for years, not to avoid them, but to understand them, to master them. Special Agent Chun sat across from a man who called himself David Marsh in the interrogation room of the Denver field office. He was unremarkable, average height, average build, brown hair graying at the temples, glasses perched on a narrow nose. He looked like a librarian, a teacher, someone's forgettable neighbor. That was the point. For 15 years, David Marsh had been invisible, moving through society like smoke, and no one had ever suspected the monster living behind those calm, intelligent eyes. You wanted ADX Florence, Chin said, her voice steady despite the rage burning in her chest. Why? Marsh smiled. It was a patient smile, the kind a professor gives a student who hasn't quite grasped a lesson. Because it's the only place in America designed to hold someone like me. Your other prisons are playgrounds. Marion was close, but they downgraded it. Pelican Bay is tough, but at state level, bureaucracy gets messy. ADX Florence is perfect. 23 hours of isolation, soundproof cells, no human contact. It's the only place where I can finally have peace. Chin leaned forward. Peace? You murdered 13 people. You were planning to murder 47 more. You don't deserve peace. Deserve has nothing to do with it, Agent Chan. Marsh's eyes never left hers. I'm giving you a gift. I'm removing myself from society permanently. I'm telling you where to find victim 13. I'm handing you a closed case that will make your career. All I ask is that you send me where I can't hurt anyone ever again. Isn't that what justice is supposed to look like? But Chin wasn't buying it. She had spent 3 years inside this man's mind, studying his patterns, his methods, his psychology. David Marsh didn't do anything without a reason. Killers like him didn't just stop. They didn't surrender. They didn't ask to be locked away in America's most secure prison unless they had a plan. The 13th victim was found exactly where Marsh said she would be. Alive. Barely. Rebecca Torres had been held in the basement in suburban Colorado for 6 weeks, drugged, terrorized, but ultimately spared. She couldn't explain why. Marsh had visited her daily, brought her food, kept her clean, talked to her about philosophy and literature and the nature of evil. Then one day, he simply left. He told her someone would find her soon. He told her he was going away to a place where he could think clearly, where the noise of the world couldn't reach him anymore. Torres's testimony was disturbing for reasons beyond the obvious trauma. Marsh had treated her captivity like a research project. He asked her questions. How did it feel to know she might die? What would she do differently if she survived? Did she believe in redemption? He took notes. He recorded her answers. He was studying her the way a scientist studies a specimen. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit concluded that Marsh was evolving. His earlier victims had been experiments in control and power. But something had changed. He was searching for something deeper. Meaning, purpose, understanding. And he believed he would find it in ADX Florence, locked away from the chaos of the outside world, with nothing but time and silence to refine whatever dark philosophy drove him. Chun watched through one-way glass as U.S. Marshals processed Marsh for transfer to Colorado. He showed no emotion, no fear, no regret. He looked almost serene, like a man finally going home after a long journey. That terrified her more than anything else. 3 days later, David Marsh arrived at ADX Florence, the prison that had broken terrorists, mob bosses, and the most violent criminals in American history. The concrete tomb where men went insane from isolation, where suicide attempts were routine, where hardened killers begged for mercy after just months in solitary confinement. Marsh walked through those gates with a slight smile on his face. He was given cell number 14 in range 13, H unit, the most isolated section of the most isolated prison in the Western world. Soundproof concrete walls 3 feet thick, a 4-inch window that showed only sky. No human contact, except the guards who delivered meals through a slot in the steel door. 23 hours a day in a 7-by-12-foot box. For the rest of his natural life. Prison officials expected him to break within 6 months. They had seen it before. The isolation destroys everyone eventually. The silence becomes torture. The loneliness becomes unbearable. Men who arrived defiant left broken, their minds shattered by the relentless nothing of supermax confinement. But David Marsh didn't break. He thrived. Guards reported that he never complained, never acted out, never showed signs of psychological distress. He spent his time reading, writing, exercising in his cell. He seemed happier than most people living in freedom. That should have been the end of the story. Monster captured. Monster caged. Justice served. Except 6 months after Marsh arrived at ADX Florence, another body was found in Chicago. A young woman, positioned exactly like the ghost's previous victims. And folded beside her body, a fresh origami crane made from a page of Dostoevsky. The same signature. The same method. Impossible. David Marsh had been locked in the most secure prison in America under 24-hour surveillance, with zero contact with the outside world. He couldn't have killed again, but someone had. Someone who knew every detail of his methods, his signature, his pattern. Someone he had been communicating with before his arrest. Or worse, someone he was communicating with now, from inside a cell designed to prevent exactly that. Agent Chin stood over the new crime scene as dawn broke over Chicago, and she realized with growing horror that catching the ghost had never been the end of the story. It had been exactly what David Marsh wanted. He hadn't surrendered. He had positioned himself. And from inside the most isolated prison in America, somehow, impossibly, his work was continuing. The investigation moved with desperate speed. Every communication in and out of ADX Florence was reviewed. Every guard interviewed. Every visitor logged. Every piece of mail Marsh had received was analyzed word by word. Nothing. The man existed in perfect isolation, exactly as the prison was designed to enforce. Yet bodies kept appearing. 3 more in 6 weeks. All bearing the ghost signature. All impossible. Chun requested access to Marsh directly, breaking protocol that forbade such contact with Supermax inmates. The warden initially refused, but when the 7th copycat murder appeared in Boston, he relented. She would get 30 minutes, separated by reinforced glass, under full surveillance. Marsh would remain shackled even in his cell. Every word would be recorded. The walk through ADX Florence was like descending into another dimension. The silence was absolute, broken only by the echo of Chen's footsteps and the metallic clang of security doors. No shouting. No chaos. Just suffocating quiet and the knowledge that behind each featureless steel door lived someone too dangerous for any other cage. She passed cells holding terrorists who had killed thousands, gang leaders who had ordered hundreds of executions. And then she reached range 13, H unit, cell 14. David Marsh sat cross-legged on his concrete bed, a book open in his lap. He looked up as Chin approached, and that same patient smile crossed his face. He had lost weight, his skin pale from lack of sunlight, but his eyes were sharp, alert, almost luminous with intelligence. Agent Chun, I wonder when you would come. 7 people are dead. 7 murders committed with your exact methodology while you've been locked in this cell. Explain it. Marsh closed his book carefully, marking his place. You're still thinking about this wrong. You're looking for a partner, an accomplice, someone I trained. But that's not what's happening. Then what is happening? I didn't create a partner, Agent Chun. I created a religion. He leaned closer to glass, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Do you know how many people follow my case? Thousands. Tens of thousands online, dissecting every detail, analyzing my methods, treating my work like scripture. I never needed to communicate with anyone from here. I just needed to exist, to be in this place, to become the legend. Chen's blood went cold. You wanted to be caught. You wanted to be sent here. ADX Florence isn't a prison, Agent Chun. It's a pulpit, the most secure, most infamous prison in America. Every criminal, every wannabe, every damaged mind looking for meaning knows this place. And they all know I'm here, locked away but unbroken. The one killer too dangerous for any other cage. I don't need to send messages. I am the message. My imprisonment is the sermon. The reality hit Chun like a physical blow. Marsh had turned his own capture into mythology by surrendering to the most feared prison in America and surviving its isolation with apparent ease. He had become exactly what he wanted, an icon, an inspiration, proof that the ghost was more than human, that his methods were perfection, that his philosophy was truth. Every copycat killer wasn't following his orders. They were worshiping his example. You can't stop it, Marsh continued, his smile widening. Even if you catch every one of them, there will be more. The ghost isn't me anymore. It's an idea. And ideas can't be imprisoned. They found my website 3 days after I was arrested. 20,000 pages of manifestos, case studies, philosophical frameworks. I spent 15 years preparing for this moment. Not the murderers, Agent Chun. The legacy. Chun stood slowly, her legs unsteady. You'll rot in this cell for the rest of your life. Alone. Forgotten. Will I? Or will I live forever in the minds of everyone who reads about the killer so dangerous that America built a concrete tomb just to hold him? Who do you think they'll remember? Agent Chun, the FBI agent who caught me, or the ghost who turned his own capture into immortality? The 30 minutes ended. Guards escorted Chun out of H Unit, through the maze of security doors, back into the blinding Colorado sunlight. She had come looking for answers. Instead, she found something far worse. Confirmation that David Marsh had won from the moment he decided to surrender. The copycat killings continued. Not frequently enough to establish a pattern, but regular enough to keep the ghost legend alive. Each killer was eventually caught, but there was always another, and another, each one claiming they were carrying on the work, honoring the method, proving the philosophy. The FBI formed a task force specifically to track ghost-inspired crimes. It never disbanded. David Marsh remains in ADX Florence, Cell 14, Range 13, H Unit. He has been there for 18 years as of this recording. Guards report he still shows no signs of psychological deterioration. He reads, writes letters that are never sent, and maintains perfect composure. Psychiatrists who have evaluated him describe a mind that has somehow found peace in absolute isolation, as if the silence he predicted he needed was exactly what he found. The true horror of ADX Florence isn't that it holds monsters. It's that sometimes, for the most twisted minds, it becomes exactly what they wanted all along. Not punishment, not rehabilitation, not even containment, but a throne from which their darkness can spread further than it ever could in freedom. Chin retired from the FBI 5 years ago. She couldn't sleep anymore, knowing that catching the ghost had only made him more powerful. She visits Rebecca Torres sometimes, the 13th victim, the one who survived. Torres has spent years in therapy, rebuilding her life, trying to forget those 6 weeks in captivity. But she can't forget what Marsh told her in that basement, the last thing he said before he left. I'm not the scariest thing in the world. Rebecca, the scariest thing is how many people wish they were me. And now they'll have a roadmap. They'll have proof that someone like me can exist, can thrive, even in the darkest hole humanity can dig. Tell them I went to ADX Florence. Tell them I smiled. Somewhere in America right now, someone is reading about the ghost. Someone is studying his methods. Someone is planning. And in a 7 by 12 foot concrete cell in the middle of the Colorado desert, David Marsh sits in silence, patient in content, knowing that his work will never truly end. Because he didn't just commit murders. He weaponized the very system designed to stop him, turning America's most secure prison into the foundation of a legacy that will outlive them all. The monsters we lock away don't always lose. Sometimes we just give them a better stage.